Welcome to the Diary of Discovery, the podcast where we delve deep into the human experience of healing and transformation. I'm your host, Jacky and each week we will sit down with inspiring individuals who have embarked on their own personal journeys of healing and self-discovery. From overcoming trauma to navigating life's challenges, our guests share their raw and honest stories, offering insights, wisdom, and hope to all who tune in. So grab your favorite cup of tea, find a cozy spot, and join us as we uncover the power of resilience, courage, and the pursuit of authenticity. This is the Diary of Discovery.
Welcome back to the podcast. I am so excited. We have the lovely Aly with us today, and I'm going to let Aly tell you where she is in the world and who she is.
Right now, I am in Wisconsin, it's Edgerton, which is not too far from the Madison area. It's like the biggest city around. But and yeah, I wrote my book, Walking Out of Shame, to kind of express for people to be that to people to come out of shame, because I spent so much time in mine, and learning to get out and sort of pass this word along is what I'm doing right now. That's my thing. I don't have a work anymore. I used to work in a hospital here in University of Wisconsin. But yeah, so that's kind of what I'm about right now.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I'm literally so excited for this conversation. We have on so many of the podcasts, we've spoke about how guilt and shame and all of these big emotions can keep you like trapped in your healing. So I'm really excited to talk to you more about your book and about what you've learned on your journey and all of that. So let's start right at the kind of beginning. Like, when did the healing start for you? What happened in your life to kind of get you to this point?
So that's a really interesting question for me, because the abuse that I went through started when I was like 5 years old. And I feel like the child always had like this little light in her. So it had already begun. The child had a light in her that wanted to find joy, happiness, and all of that. And so it and it was there were little things along the way that took me up the next level, the next level. Um, a couple of books were huge things for me. When see, I must have been in my 40s when I belonged to a Unity church, and we got together and we were studying this book called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. A lot of people have heard about it. It's a beautiful book. It's actually a 12-week course, and it's about creativity and all of that. But it got me started on journaling and getting in touch with, waking up in the morning and dumping my feelings and looking at them. So that, and just doing that and doing that and doing that is huge. You begin to see all the things that get recycled over and over again in your brain, and so yeah, and you start looking at, it's like, okay, I'm doing this over and over again, and I'm thinking these same thoughts over and over again. I need to do something about it. So it takes you to a next step. And it just gets you in touch with your feelings, which I'm learning is really, really important. To be able to feel and name your feelings is very important. When people can't do that, that's when they really get stuck in reacting, in not knowing to do what they need to do about what's going on in the world around them. They just get very frustrated when you can't speak and name your feelings. So that is a huge thing. So I learned that. And then yeah, and then somewhere also along the way, probably not too much after that, maybe a year or so, I read this book. Somebody suggested this book, Loving What Is by Byron Katie. And that book, um, taught me so much about truth and how we actually see the world from our own perceptions, what we think it is, and we don't necessarily see it from what actually is. And what actually, because we've got all these pre, these things that we've already fixed in our mind that we're looking through. And she teaches how to stop doing that. I love one of my favorite sayings of hers that is just somewhere near the beginning of the book is, how do I know the wind should be blowing? Because it's blowing. How do I know this should have happened to me? Because we say, oh, that shouldn't have happened. Well, in certain senses, I agree. I mean, it's like we don't want those things to happen. We didn't ask for them to happen, and they're not pretty and they're not fun. But to say that they shouldn't have happened, that's arguing with the truth. They did. So it taught me so much about that. And after I read that book, it's like, I got to go to my mom. I got to go to my mom and tell her that no matter what, I'm whole and complete. I wasn't damaged. And it's like, so everything's okay, mom. She still carries a lot of guilt about what I went through as a child. But yeah. So those were some huge catalysts. And then a third one was I had a coach, and I was 62 at this time, and he said, and we were in a business together, and he wanted all his people to get in touch with their best selves, right? So he was a coach, and we were starting this online thing with coaching and trying to as a startup, and it didn't pan out. But this interview for me with him was huge. He went through with each one of his people and asked them about their lives. So his first question to me was, "How old are you, Aly?" I said, "I'm 60, 62." And he said, "Okay, so what was your life like when you were 50?" So that was a good time. That was a good time in my life. I was getting healthier, et cetera, et cetera. And I didn't think I could. And there was a big breakthrough and all of that. And he said, okay, how about 40 and 30 and 20? So things had been happening in my life. I had a first husband who was abusive. My second husband ended up having the gambling problem, and I had to leave him. And so all this stuff is coming up. And then he gets to 10 years old. And I'm trying to tell him, I'm starting to tell him, and I am in tears. It's like, uh, yeah, my dad was abusing me, he was sexually abusing me, and um, all that. And so he said, okay. He said, what I want you to do is go out and tell your story to 30 people in 30 days. Can you do that? Will you do that? I was like, oh my God. But by this time, I had had mentors and other mentors, and I saw that going to that edge was helpful. So it's like, okay, yeah, I'll do it. And once I did that, like I lined up people from my Facebook page, from, old friends, um, and I just lined up people and got and had Zoom calls with them and telling my story. By the time I got done with that, it was almost boring to tell my story. I got tired of it. And it was like so that was very interesting. It took the sting out. And not only that, I there were so many beautiful comments, it's like that people made. Aly, you need to go out and tell your story. And uh, and you're a shining light, and whatever they said that just touched me. And it was like, no, you know what? I don't have to hold all this shame in anymore. I don't have to hold all this shame anymore. Give myself the safety that I need to give myself. Because that's one of the things the coach said. It's like, I see you. It's like your whole life, you're in this thing, like, am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? And it's like, I'm not the only one. I know a lot of people just it's human nature in a way. to be checking if we're safe all the time. And I could finally release some of that. Yeah.
Oh, that's incredible. It's so amazing to be able to actually look at it from that like growing point of like, you know, these books helped and these thought processes helped. And I think like when you were saying about that idea of like we see the world through our own lens and our own perspective, like that's such an important lesson to learn, and also to know that, you know, things happen and
Yeah.
we label them good or bad and decide how they actually impact our lives. But there's so much societal pressure to label things as good or bad, or, you know, how we should feel about things. But then also
Yeah.
that lack of understanding what our emotions are. Most people have a vocabulary of 4 emotions that they can tell you, and actually there's a scale of, you know, 25 of the things that most people don't actually know what they're feeling 90% of the time. So I think all of this is absolutely incredible. And I think like the question I always like to ask people is, as you were going on this journey, whether at different stages or, you know, as you kind of accepted that shame and decided like how you were going to move through that, what did you have to embrace about yourself and change about yourself in order to go on this journey?
Yeah. I had been like felt so hidden and so secretive about my life. And I just felt so small. And I had to learn to, I don't know, make just let myself come out of that. Let myself come forward a little bit, a little bit, a little bit at a time, as I felt I was able to come forward. And that's really what I had to do. And I had to embrace that what happened to me was what happened to me. And the shame was something that I was putting on it. Like I was painting that on there, and it didn't have to be there. And because when we're the most vulnerable is when we connect with people, and that's when we feel more safe, actually. When we're vulnerable with people and they're hearing us, you know. And so I had to learn to do that, all of that. Yeah.
I mean, vulnerability is the hardest lesson to learn in life. So
Yeah.
difficult. But
Yeah.
I hear so many people say, as they've gone through this like this healing journey and they found out more about who they are and felt more secure in themselves, that ability to be vulnerable with other people becomes a little bit easier because you know who you are and what value you bring to the world. And there's a lot of things that you can kind of put in place to make that vulnerability feel a little bit easier, I think, which is always really, really important. But healing isn't always easy. Like going through this process isn't always easy. So what are there moments that you can remember where you found it really hard, or you thought like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to do this?
So by doing this, like coming out of the shame, is that what you mean? So because yeah, that's kind of a big story for me, because the time that I really remember going, I can't go on. Um, I was 18, and there was a lot of stuff going on in my family. My family was divorcing. My parents were divorcing, and it got really ugly, really ugly too. I don't want to go into the whole gory details, but and I talk more about it in my book because I wanted to be truthful about it. But to the point where I ended up hitting my mother, gave her a black eye, And and this was in the middle of just trying to sort things out, like between my figuring things out between, okay, my mom is saying this, my dad is saying that, and I wanted to be helpful to my mom.
Mm.
But when my dad would speak, it's like he would enthrall me and I would believe in what he said. It's like, yeah. And so anyway, it got very, very ugly. And my mom ended up leaving the house with my siblings. I came home from classes at UNLV and she wasn't there. And yeah, mm, I ended up going with my dad to California because he was being transferred to a base in California. Eh, um, he oh boy, I haven't I'm missing part of this story. It's He had a girlfriend from Germany, and she had come and gone back when I was graduating from high school. And now, since my parents were divorcing, he wanted her to come back, and she did. And I was living with the two of them and feeling, it's like my naive mind, we were going to be a happy little family of three, and just not rational at all. I see now the way I wanted it to be. So it's like just ignoring the truth of the ugliness that was happening. And so at one point I felt so like I didn't have any place where I really belonged, because I didn't feel like I belonged with my father there and his girlfriend. And I didn't belong at home anymore. She had packed up my stuff and put it in the garage when we told her that I was going away with my dad. She had packed it all up, and so when they came to pick up my stuff, it was all ready. And so I didn't feel like I belonged there anymore. She didn't trust me anymore, and I couldn't, looking back, I couldn't blame her. I could not blame her. That was the first time and last time I ever hit my mother, and I've cried so many times with her over that. Um, because it was a mess. And so there I was in California with my dad and his wife, and feeling like I didn't belong there. I was a burden there and a third wheel there, and I didn't belong anywhere. So the way I went about it was kind of funny, because it wasn't very smart, but I went and I got 2 bottles of Nitol, okay, which is a sleeping medication, but it's not very effective for suicide, which is what I was contemplating. So I got 2 bottles of Nitol, and I'm just looking at them and contemplating them. And then one day my dad and his girlfriend go out for a long day, and I sat there with the pills and with glass of iced tea, and I took them, little by little, and I took them all. And I laid down, and I thought I was going to die, you know. And then I got panicked. I got panicked, and I called the ER, and I said on base, because my dad was in the Air Force. And I called the ER, and I said, "Oh, I took 2 bottles of nitol," and the person on the other end is saying nitro, and I said, "No, no, nitol," and she's like, "Okay, you're gonna be all right. Just don't, just don't, because yeah, just don't go to sleep. Don't lay down, and I'm going to send an ambulance and keep, walk around, and you'll be fine." And I went, and first of all, I threw up, and then they took me to the hospital, threw up the rest of it, and saw a psychiatrist who made me promise to come see him, but I didn't. I never did. And not long after that, I left my dad's house and was hoping they would never have to know, but there were bills that came in, so he found out. But by that time, I was gone. And by that time, I was living with my first husband, who was, yeah, there was abuse there also. And, but that, I just, it was just like I can remember lying there and it's like, no, 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 no. I imagined my dad coming in and, how awful it would be, and my mom too. And it's like, oh God, what am I doing? And I promised myself never to do anything like that again. But that was a really dark moment for me. I was feeling like, yeah, I was just ready to go. I was just done and I couldn't go on.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, it's like I'm so glad that you're here. I'm so glad that that wasn't the story that was being told after the fact. But like I also absolutely get it. Like these things can be hard. It can feel really, really difficult when, especially with things like a sense of belonging. And it's such a primal need for humans to belong somewhere that when you
Yeah,
take that away from somebody, it can be really, really difficult. And I think that, that process of what you've spoken about in the sense of like understanding your feelings and what you've learned later on in your life, like if you'd known that back then, how much of a difference it could have made, and how it could have made everything so much easier for you to go through. But there's also a path that we have
yeah.
to walk to become the people we are and to get to where we need to be. So like I can absolutely see that. So what do you think the biggest like outlook change or belief change was as you've kind of moved through life and gone on this healing journey, confronted your shame? Like what's changed from the way that you see the world?
Well, I feel like these days I mean, every day isn't like, oh, just roses and lollipops and wonderful and whatever. But there's more of a grounding joy now that I have just, it's like allowed myself to be as I am as best I can, just be as I am. And there's so much, yeah, a grounding joy, I would say, that it got overshadowed. I became very serious and very afraid of the world, you know. And now I'm just learning to release more into being okay, It's just like whatever comes up, it's okay. Yeah. So
I
I would
love
say
that.
that's the biggest change.
That's such a beautiful belief to have, though. Whatever comes up, it's okay. Like, that's such a beautiful belief to hold because it just gives you such a wonderful springboard for life. Like, in that moment, whatever comes up, it'll be okay. Um, Most people s- sit on the other side of that spectrum. Like, bad things will always happen, or, the beliefs that a lot of people sit in are not that positively focused. So I think that that's a really incredible um, sort of like mantra to have in life. Like no matter what happens, like you'll figure it out, everything will be okay, you'll be able to get through it. I think that that's really incredible. And earlier on you were talking about the fact that you started journaling and that you've had a couple of different mentors and like people in your life, read a few books that have been really helpful. What else have you done? Like what did you actually do during this process to help you sort of release some of the shame and become the person that you are now?
Well, so first the challenge, the 30-day challenge was huge on that. And secondly, um, I was at a point in my life where I didn't know what I wanted to do next. What was I going to do? And I spoke to one coach and she said, Aly, from what you're telling me about what you want and how you want to reach people, I think you need to talk to this man, Perry Power. I think you need to speak with him. And Perry Power has us write books about our life and our trauma and tell our stories. And because his big thing is breaking the silence. That's his huge thing. And he's helping a lot of people do that. And he helped me do that. And that was just writing the book and trying to sort out what happened and how it happened. And because it gets so mixed up in the brain. It just kind of it's like when you're not focused on it, and it had me focus on it. What happened? How did it happen? When did it happen? And all the answers aren't there. It's still kind of messy. It feels kind of still messy to me, but I can see the mess a little better, and and I can talk about it a little better. And so that was a huge thing to write my book, to go through that experience, and then to get out of myself enough to try to let people know that I've done this and to try to reach the people who might benefit from it. So, yeah. So that, I mean, that was a huge thing too. It's like after that challenge, and once I've done this, it's like, okay, everybody knows this can't hurt me anymore. This cannot hurt me anymore. I heard Oprah say once something about being unblackmailable. Which is funny thing to say, but it's like, yeah, nobody can come to me with this and say, "Oh, I know about you." It's like, yeah, so does everybody.
I love that. Unblackmailable. That is such a that's such a
Isn't
good
that
way.
good?
And
Yeah.
I remember when I started the podcast, I had this like real moment of fear when I first was going to put the podcast out because I tell a lot of my story, and in a very similar way, like there was loads of things that I'd been through or felt or thought that I'd never actually shared with people around me, with my family, with my friends. And there was this real moment of vulnerability of, oh my gosh, when I put this out into the world, everyone's gonna know. And then there was this real sense of power, this real sense of like, actually, everyone's gonna know. Like, and
Yeah.
like, I'm so strong, and like, you're so strong to be able to go through this journey, write this book, share it with the world, use your story as a platform for other people. Like, you are such an incredibly strong person. And to actually be able to show the world that, I think, is so incredible. It's so incredible.
Thank you, Jackie. And I think when we do it, when we take that step, we find out there's no courage without fear. And but it's so worth breaking out of that fear. It's so worth taking that step out and going, no, I'm not going to stay in this, because it's just so freeing. And then you go, it's like that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, is because, like, no, you don't have to live like that. You don't have to live like that. Come, you don't have to do that anymore. So that I just want people to know that. And yeah, it becomes like a huge, like you indicated, just this huge relief at that point. And it's like, yeah, maybe it took some courage, but I'm so glad I did it. Right? So yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And if you were giving advice to somebody who was in this place feeling a lot of shame at the moment, and hiding and not showing themselves to the world, what would your recommendations be for them? How could they start moving through that?
Well, I talked to some people who feel like they're kind of stuck in it, like they can't get out. And you have, the first thing I would say is you have to believe that healing is possible. You have to open that door just a little bit and say, yes, I want healing. Because if you don't start with that, it's not going to come. It's not going to be bulldozed on you. You have to open that door a little bit. That's what I tell people. Open the door a little bit, believe that it can happen. And you don't have to know now how it's going to happen. And you don't have to forgive anybody right now. All you have to do is open that door a little bit. If you do that, magic happens. So that's my advice to people is just have this, well, in the Christian faith, they say this small grain of mustard seed grain of faith that it can happen. And it will. It can, because just if you just keep that door open, if you just keep that door open a little bit and don't shut it and say, no, I can't come out, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is always the first step, that belief in healing is possible, something better is available to me, something good can come from this. Like that first step in believing is so, so important. So I think that that's such an incredible thing for people to understand, definitely. And I really wanted to ask, like, this idea of shame specifically, because I know that you wrote your book on this and that you spoke a lot about this. So what did shame look like to you? How did it present itself in your life?
So, yeah. For me, shame looked like being very secretive about my life. And that's like with everything about, with everybody, about even small things, just being secretive about my life and not wanting people to know me. And shame looked like, well, part of it was I had this real fight with food. I gained weight, lost weight. There were, covered myself with layers of fat and then took them off. But as I took them off, there was still shame involved with that. It got to a point where it's like it was very important for me to to look a certain way, and that's shame too, you know. Yeah, I went from not caring what I ate to eating, thinking and eating about thinking about food all the time, and to like if I had an 800 calorie day, I did really well, and I was gonna try to bite those 800 calories off, and it was like it was that's not I was near, not quite anorexic. But I was on borderline thinking. I had that borderline thinking that was really close to that. So it showed up for me in, yeah, my relationship with food, um, and being secretive about my life and feeling like I didn't really belong anywhere again because I didn't let myself belong anywhere. Um, Held myself back. So I didn't, yeah, so I couldn't belong anywhere. And so that's kind of how it showed up for me. And just feeling like if people knew about me, oh my God, they would despise me. They would, it was like, so that was shame for me.
Wow.
And Brene Brown says some good stuff about the differences between guilt, shame. Um, have you heard of these? Yes. So yeah, all the difference between guilt and shame and all of this. And yeah, shame is when you are bad. And if you believe you are bad, just that says that you don't think you can do anything about it. Like
Mm.
guilt you can work on, you can apologize, you can um do better next time. That's guilt. But
Mm.
shame is like, no, I'm bad and nothing's gonna change that. And so you're stuck in it.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's amazing. Like, I always love to ask people how their emotions actually manifested for them, because obviously it's always different for everyone. Like, shame looks different for everyone and makes people behave differently or show up differently. And I know for me, going through my sort of depression, and we lost quite a few family members all in one go, and my shame and my guilt manifested, very differently in trying to overcare for people, and putting myself last, and like just like showing up for everybody else and not myself. And it's so good again to like have these discussions, because I think for so many people, as you were saying, they don't necessarily connect their actions with emotions. They don't really connect, like, oh, if I'm being super controlling around my eating, that could actually be linked to something, deeper. Or if I'm being, super accommodating of everybody else and people pleasing, like that could be linked to something that I'm actually not dealing with. So I think it's so incredible to be able to actually like ask these questions. And once you let go of that shame and kind of wrote the book and had walked through it and had gotten to the other side, like, how did life feel different?
It felt exciting. It felt like I didn't know what was gonna happen next, but it felt like things were opening up, you know,
Mm.
like yeah, like just really opening up and there were possibilities. I could believe in possibilities again, you know, and yeah, yeah, just my outlook that way completely changed.
That's incredible. Again, like such a positive outlook to have, like possibilities are opening up for me, good things are coming. Like it's such a shift from that place of shame and guilt. Like it's such a night and day shift, which is so incredible. But obviously you did the work, like you did the work to get there. You
Yeah.
process through all of your emotions while you were writing the book. And if anybody hasn't already, Perry was on as a guest back in August. So if you haven't listened to his story, you can go and listen to his story as well. But I think that platform of being able to actually talk through your story or write through your story or like share your story, even if it was like when you were saying like that challenge of like 30 days to actually go out and make you the center of attention and say, I'm going to actually share about me, like it's such a different way to look at things. So I think that that's such an incredible thing for people who are struggling in this way to have as like a toolkit to take into the world and say, actually, rather than just asking everybody about themselves or deflecting from myself all the time, I'm going to take that moment to answer the question, how are you, like truthfully for once, or have those deeper conversations with people. But I definitely think as you go through your healing journey, you get more and more able to have those deep conversations, whereas when you're hiding yourself and you're struggling yourself, it can be really jarring to kind of have those deep conversations because you're not really in a place where you're ready for them.
Yeah. Yeah. So part of what really ran deep for me, I realized was is like this abuse, this sexual abuse, and it lasted a long time. It was from 5 until I was like 18 years old. That's when we were in that house in California, I was finally like deflecting and saying no and refusing. And I had been up to that point so accommodating, so it's like I was brought up to be good girl. And there was part of the shame that was like, yeah, you let it go on for a long time, you know, and that was hard to forgive myself for. That was, yeah, that was a challenge because it was like, well, you were grown up by then. You were 18 by then. And how are you still, you know, um, yeah. So yeah, that was part of what I had to come out of too. And yeah, it just it was hard. And I finally it's like I finally had to give that up too. It's like, well, you know, whatever happened is what happened. And I can blame my father too. It's like, well, that's how he brought me up, and I was inculcated, and but it gets to a point where that doesn't even matter. It's just all in the past, you know, um, and not even trying to blame anymore. Just it's in the past, and it's what happened, you know.
I think there's a real shift in that. Again, like when you heal and you go through this, I found it really, really amazing to be able to look at bad things that had happened and not assign blame to them, not look at them and think it was that person's fault or they should have done better, and actually just to be able to manage my own reaction to them, decide how I wanted my life to be based on the fact that these things had happened, and actually just take that responsibility of I can't change the past, that's fine. And, whoever was involved in the situation, they've got their own lives to deal with, and they need to deal with their own shame and guilt and, feelings that they have about the situation. But actually, for me, my whole responsibility is what I choose to do with this, is how I choose to move forward with this. Because you can choose your path. You can choose to stay where you are and stay in that anger and that guilt and that shame and, hold on to all of that and let it stop you from being the person that you're like here to be. Or you can sit in that space and say, okay, these things happened. I was in that moment. I made these decisions with what I had available to me. And now I'm going to make better choices. I'm going to make different decisions. I'm going to move through this in a different way. And I think there's such power in pulling all of that back within you and just saying, I get to choose now. I get to make the decision as to where I go now.
Yes.
And it's not on anybody else to say what this is going to look like and how I'm going to deal with this and how I'm going to walk through this. Like, this is on me. Like, did you feel that as you were going through?
Yeah. 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 I I I did. It's like, okay. Well, and one of the things I say to people now is, okay, so this happened or that how can you use it? How can you use it? How could you make something from it? And that's the outlook I try to have now. Yeah, exactly. I saw this meme the other day that I'm just going to pass along because it was just so good. Somebody said, imagine a snake bit you, and instead of taking care of the poison, you go around trying to find the snake and catch it so you can explain to it how you didn't deserve that. Okay, that doesn't make any sense.
But it's how so many people live their lives. It's literally
Yeah.
how so many people live their lives. That is such a good analogy. I love that so much. It's so good. Oh my gosh, Aly. Okay, so what is next on your journey? So you've written the book, you're promoting the book, which is absolutely incredible. But what's next on your healing journey?
Well, Yeah, I feel like right now, Jacky, what is next is what I'm doing right now, learning how to come out, speak about it and share it so that I can do what I set out to do. And that's to let other people know that they can be free. So I right now I'm like I feel I'm in the middle of what's next, you know. So yeah. And after that, I don't know yet. We'll see.
Oh, isn't that the beauty of life, though? There's
Yeah.
always an unfolding, there's always something happening. And I think, like, it's so good as you go on this journey and as you get better at healing, like when you're in the middle of it, you're in that messy bit, it doesn't actually feel as scary as it used to or as hard as
Yeah.
it used to. Like you have so much more capacity to deal with these things and to know what you're feeling, and you've got tools in your toolbox. And I think that that is like, it's such a message that I want people to understand when they're listening to this podcast, is that the more that you do, the more that becomes available to you. It's so
Absolutely.
incredible. Aly, it has been an absolute honor to have you on the podcast and to talk to you today. I'm going to put a link to your book below the podcast so that people can purchase your book and read your story and get to know you better. But thank you so much for taking the time to go through and just share your wisdom with the world.
Thank you so much, Jacky. This is delightful for me too. Very much so. You put me at ease and it was very, very nice. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to another inspiring episode of the Diary of Discovery. If you found value in today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and share it with your friends, family, or anyone else you think might benefit from the stories of hope and transformation. Your feedback means the absolute world to us, so please take a moment to leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your reviews help us to reach even more listeners and continue to bring this meaningful content to the world. Until next time, remember, your healing journey is valid. You are never alone, and you have the strength to get through this. Keep shining bright, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Diary of Discovery.